and welcome to CIO News. I am Khushbu Soni, your host for the broadcast and editor-chief at CIO News. This is our exclusive fireside chat powered by Goto. It is a recorded session and will be available on our website, that is cionews.co.in, and our CIO News LinkedIn handle. My pleasure to invite our today's guest. We have Mr. Narendran Thillaisthanam, the head of RBA from Vuram Technologies. Sir, I hope I got your last name correct. I tried to practice it, but I just wanted to see if I got it correctly.
It's Thillaisthanam. It's actually a village name in Tamil Nadu,
Oh,
on the banks of
okay.
Kaveri. It's a beautiful village, actually. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Nice.
yeah,
Okay. I tried to practice, but then, okay. I think
Hmm.
the pronunciation would come best for
Sure.
you until I practice it. Great. Mr. Narain, sir, I'm going to call you Narain if that's okay.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Yeah,
Okay. Perfect. So, Naren has 20 plus years of experience in the technology domain, spanning across product management, core software development, architecture, and is currently leading the RP strategy and delivery for Vuram Technologies. Previously, has managed data business intelligence team at Altisource Labs. He's building by building next gen applications. Mr. Nareen has extensive experience across technology, across various domains, and has worked for various organizations. So I'm really looking forward, sir, to have this conversation with you and to learn from your perspectives on report report.
sure. Pleasure to have to be on board, Khushbu. Looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Mr. Naren, I'm also accompanied by Triveni Rabindraraj on this panel today. She is the India sales head from Goto. Triveni has about 20 plus years of experience across business development, strategic alliances, and people management. Triveni has worked with brands such as Wipro, Dun& Bradstreet, City, and many more. Triveni, pleasure to have you again.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks so much. Looking forward to this. Sharing the dice with someone like Nareen. Look forward to hear a lot of your experiences, etc. Thank you. Thanks.
Great. So to begin with, then I would want you to, just understand how has the working change post-COVID? What does your typical role look like now? And even, for the company, Vuram Technologies, how has the working changed post-COVID?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting change we are seeing in the industry, Khushbu.
Yeah.
What has happened if you really take a step back and understand? The pandemic forced a lot of people to stay indoors. It's a well-known information, right? But the consequence of this is that information had to move from being physical. If somebody was sending an expense through a physical document, and couriering it, no longer, were those acceptable. Suddenly, you found, be it hospitals, be it insurance companies, whether it's a claim, whether it is doctor's prescription, everything had to be digitized. We call this as a digitization phase. It's like the first phase of what we call as a triple D. I'll talk a little bit more about the triple D model, that we are seeing. But the net effect is that content is actually moving digital, right? And so a lot of work is happening virtually, and a lot of work is actually happening on the cloud, right? These are extremely important imperatives for organizations to understand. Now, what this has also done is it has put a pressure on the workforce to adapt and scale in a non-sequential way. It's no longer enough if you just do the same thing more. You had to do it in a different way. And we all know that the pandemic unleashed a great resignation. Throughout the world, there is stress on everyone. So people not only had to work more, they had to work smart, right? So adapting to the new workforce, a new age model, working model, becomes a very important problem. Now I'll talk about this, the change itself, in terms of couple of dimensions. One, from an individual perspective, you know, the demands are such that, you have to manage your house, you have to manage your work, and the boundaries are not physical anymore. You sit in the same room with your kid, take care of your kid, if you're a mom especially, and yet you have to answer a call, you have to answer your boss or your client, right?
Yeah.
That's not easy. I mean, we oftentimes take it for granted. Now, what it means is that empathy becomes very, very important, right? At Vuram, actually, we give a lot of importance to empathy. It is for this reason. We are in a world where on the one side we are moving touchless, on the other side we need more and more of healing touch, right? So
Yeah.
bringing a balance, if you're looking at it from a human perspective, from a HR perspective, designing policies that will allow employees to not only work efficiently but also feel empowered, feel connected, feel like they're not making mistakes. They are part of the whole ecosystem, not just your extended family as well. So that's important, your policies. And also tools like Goto, tools like Webex, they're extremely important, right? What is happening is we are mimicking a persona. People used to work with each other, they used to go to canteens, they used to have discussions. Now all of that needs to happen virtually now, right? So collaboration becomes extremely important. And so organizations will have to build tools, build capabilities, bring chats and other conversations, and essentially, simulate the same experience as what people would otherwise have in the pre-COVID world. I think that's a lot of change we are demanding from the workforce of today, and adapting to that is a significant. I think people are going through that. Would you agree?
Very true, very true. And I think so. Earlier it was remote working. So it was work from office, then remote working, then hybrid
Yeah.
working.
Yes.
There's a great increase in the digitization. We've seen that shift post COVID. So very rightly said. I think we all are adopting to the new wave and the new way of working as well. I want to understand, and given the demands of today's distributed workforce, it's become imperative to scale up and arm the IT teams with the right
Yeah.
tools.
Correct.
Right. So what have been the demands of your IT ecosystem on this front?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to me, the number one thing, without a question, is security, right? Like I said, information is moving online, information is on the cloud, it is easily accessible, it is digitized, and yet, we don't have people within the confines of a boundary, right? What this means is that we are living in a world where uh, trust and security is playing a humongous role. Okay, so the tools that we bring in, should have enough impetus on how do we measure security, how do we manage security, how do we make sure information is not lost, information is not even accidentally abused, right? I mean, people may not have planned for something, and yet there are reasons for information to be outside the confines of who needs to see it, right? So security, short answer is very, very important. Number two, ease of use is something we place a huge importance to, because again, workforce is diverse, they have to collaborate, and so they have to be able to self train themselves, and the pace at which changes are happening is too fast, for us to be training them time and again. So ability to collaborate and use it easily becomes extremely important. And we are attached to other dimensions, Khushbu. One is that we play heavily into automation. Okay, which means what part of the work can be constantly automated so that we can empower our people to do better things, right? And that's something that we evaluate. And the last point is, no system, no tool is going to operate in isolation. How well do they
Yeah.
integrate with each other? How well do they play into the larger ecosystem? And this is not something that we can undermine either. So to us, all these four parameters are very, very important, with security being a very, very high priority, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this has been one of the priorities for all the organizations now. So, great. So, do you see this as a gap? Is your IT help desk fully empowered to provide fast and efficient support? I mean, for the working of today and in the future?
Well, I would say yes and no. I'm not necessarily talking on behalf of our company. I'm talking, in general,
Yeah.
what I'm seeing in the industry on the whole, right?
Okay.
Um, See, let us understand, let us empathize it from an IT support desk point of view, right? So we talked about the sudden shift in the ways of working, sudden shift in the business operating model, right? And if I have a 100-member team that is doing support, Now, suddenly, what used to be like a, let's say, 1,000-member workforce supported by a 100-member support staff, now suddenly everybody is online, right? Everybody's demands have grown exponentially, high. The tools that we have to, download, monitor, support, the work has doubled or tripled, right? So what this means is that this has put a lot of pressure, and I want to really really thank. I want to take a minute for those people, the warriors. I would say they are the health, like they are the warriors of the workforce, if you will. They are the ones who are front ending this transformation, the workforce transformation, and
And I think
so
added to that, like you mentioned, right, the great resignation also has put a lot of
absolutely,
pressure on them, right? Especially this section
absolutely.
of people.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right, Triveni. Right. So that I want. So my heart goes to them for for a minute. I want to acknowledge. I want to take this time to say that they've done a thankless job. When there's a problem, we go to them and yell at them, right? But what they have done behind the scenes is just fantastic. They've helped us during this transformation. But what I also want to caution, as a thought leader, what I also want to say is a linear transformation is not enough. We need to be prepared for the next generation. I want to talk about that. I call this as, we talked about digitization. I call this as the digitalization. What I mean by that is new processes will have to be adopted, right? You cannot do the same old way of doing the same thing again and again. Again, if I take certain things like if prescription or a claims management, right? You cannot have the same people do the same tasks time and again. A certain part of it has to be automated, right? So we have to bring digital workforce and human workforce, and whether it is support or even human or any operations, you will see a workforce which is a combination of both digital and human. And any organization that is prepared for this next round of change is the one that can actually scale to what is going to come next. You get me right? Otherwise, people are going to be stressed. People are going to be, you're stretching them far too long. So we need to learn to adapt how, we can smartly leverage. The low end of the work has to go to automation, and the high end of the work has to be with people being the strong central element of all these aspects of it.
Right, right, absolutely. Absolutely great. Great insights, Naren. Triveni, I wanted to put my next question to you. What you've been interacting with a lot of CIOs and CTOs. So, what should be the top priorities when considering remote support solution, as per
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So I think a couple of points, right? Before I give you the straight answer, I just want to, like, I've been selling remote support before the pandemic and now after the pandemic. So probably I'll just give you some, the changes that's happened in the way, this whole remote support has been looked at by, people like Nareen and, likes of them in the other companies, right? Earlier, before the pandemic, obviously because everybody were there in office, there was not a really a strong use case for remote support, right? Other than probably big multinational companies or companies like Nareen itself, who's into business process outsourcing, where they have to support their end customers, etc. But otherwise, the need was not there, and the main reason was because it was almost 100% in office, right? We never had a thought of, or we never had a concept of remote. Maybe some of the software in industry did, but that also very, 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 low number, right? Like we've seen this remote working adoption almost go up to some 170%, probably from 2003 to 2020. So now it's remote is going to be there, may not be 100% remote, 100% office. I don't think we're ever going to see that kind of a scenario. It's definitely going to be hybrid. So, which means that the employees, and like Nareen rightly said, right? I like one part of it that you said, that on one side we are going touchless, but we have to get in the healing touch. I'm just going to steal that line from you. It's amazing. So, I think one thing is very, very important is for us to see how to support employees across, right? Be it their technical requirements or be it their functional requirements, etc. Which means we will always have at least 50% of the employees not there in on your premises, which means we need to have that remote support. So earlier, what remote support used to be like a good to have tool, but today it's really become a must to have, right? Because of the because of various reasons. One is people going remote, people working from hybrid locations. The other thing is that we still sort of experiencing the great resignation, specifically in the service desk industry, right? So one of the analyst reports said that earlier the attrition level was about 30%, but in 2021, which was the year of great resignation, specifically in the service desk industry, they saw almost 80% globally was the attrition rate, right? So giving that, that's put enormous pressure on these guys. But they're like Naren rightly said, they're doing a thankless job, right? We go to them only when we have a trouble, when we have some issue. But these guys have been like the silent warriors, to be very frank. So how do we really equip them to do better? That's where the remote support tools come in. Companies like us sort of became relevant more than ever, right? Not only for collaboration tools, but also for the IT support teams, etc. So one of the things that we are seeing a shift in. And again, I think to emphasize on the point that Naren mentioned, the first and foremost question we are being asked today by CTOs and CIOs are, what is the security architecture of your tool, right? Which was never asked, right? Earlier, before the pandemic, this used to be like a check in the box. It used to just be a formality. We have four questionnaires around security. Does your tool comply to it? That's it. But now we've seen a huge shift where the discussion starts off with security architecture, where the infosec clearance also, we have to have an infosec clearance. In some large organization they have a third party doing it for them. In some organizations they do it internally. So security is definitely taken a big place, right? And more so in remote support tools, because again, one of the researches that the analyst organizations did said that in the last 2 years, right, ever since the pandemic, the number of cyber attacks have gone up more, the number of breaches have increased, and 80% of that accounts to human error, right? And or like say human intervention. 80% of the breaches have happened because of that, right? Like one of the recent breaches, one of a very big company, right? How did the breach there happen? The employee had stored all the password credential on their Gmail account, right? And Gmail is not secured, right? I mean, Gmail was not the official way of communicating, right? And that's not secured. So obviously, the malicious actor got into the Gmail account, got hold of all the official password that was saved there. So you never know, and this is again a complete human error, right? So and remote support is one of the means or one of the tools that the malicious actors also use to get in, because you can easily remote into an employee system. So the question is like, does your remote support tool comply to a single sign on, or multi-factor authentication? Those kind of integrations are extremely critical, right? The other thing, the second point, again, something that Naren mentioned was integration, right? In 2020, what happened was all of us were forced to buy, or let's call it a panic buy, a lot of tools, like so many tools we had to, right? Because that time it was a point of survival and we could not have probably escaped that. So, but now it's said that this is the year of consolidation. This is the year to see how can you integrate and reduce the number of tools, reduce that tool fatigue on the on your IT teams, right? So how well is your remote support tool integrating with your ticketing system, right? How well, like, or your service now, is it sort of getting integrated? How well is it integrating with your CRM systems? So on and so forth. That has become very critical, right? And the last one is also the functionalities. Again, something that Nareen touched upon is how easy is it for your technicians to use it. That is very important, right? Because if they don't find it easy, then your adoption sort of level goes down. How can they quickly remote in and sort of do the diagnostics? And remember another thing, a lot of our technicians are traditionally trained to handle laptops and probably desktops, not tabs and not mobiles. But now more and more employees are using tabs, are using mobiles. So how easily can your remote support tools support those end devices? So though these are some of the things which we see has really changed, and that's because of the hybrid working.
Excellent. Thank you, Triveni. Then my next question is for you. Having a tool with the right priorities met is one half of the challenge, and we know the other half of the challenge is the adoption to meet the ROI standards. So,
Yeah.
what are your driving forces when it comes to achieving the optimal ROI?
Well, yeah, there's certainly a very fundamental question, right? I mean, any customer we go to, I mean, but we are in the process automation industry, right? So any customer we go to, ROI, is the central theme. Otherwise, there's no point in taking it up. Yes, identifying the right tools is one, but I see change management as being very, very critical, right? So, for example, let's play it out like this. Before a certain change happens, there is a lot of anxiety, there is a lot of fear. People are averse to changes. By definition, why would you want to change if something is going right? So there is this notion that I may become redundant, or my job is going to go away. um, you know I think it is very, very important for us to involve people, be transparent, educate them that this change is for the better holistically. Yes, some jobs may have to be transitioned, and people may have to be trained and put in another different role. But in my opinion, involving them fairly early, and assuaging the fear factor, and basically creating the need, and having them see the need for this change is very important as we undergo this change. So change management is super critical, from my point of view. Obviously, the other things go hand in hand. How do you redesign the processes? I talked about digitalization, which is what, once you have everything as a digital content, what parts of the new process will you do it in a different way, right? So now that you have more empowered tools coming into play here, how do you do that becomes an important conversation. And the third dimension is obviously training, right? I mean, we cannot underestimate that once a process is changed, people will have to function in a very different way, right? And lastly, I would say, very, very important, most important is metrics. How do you measure the after the changes are incorporated? How do you measure the change, and how do you know that this is really giving you the value? Oftentimes I advocate for a pilot. You do a quick pilot, see the results, and just like in agile, you iterate over it, improvise it. Do not think of this as a one time done deal. You have people working in a certain way, and don't compartmentalize it and say, do not ever say that, I'm going to throw away those people, I'm going to bring, I'm going to automate 70%, 80%. That mindset is not going to work. It has to be a human centric change, and humans will have to be at the center of the change and drive the change. And that's the only recipe for success, in my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, okay, Naren, security, as you mentioned, is one of the top priorities across
Right.
organization. What are the standards by which an IT support tool should adhere as per you?
Sure. No, I think Triveni talked at length about the importance of security, and I just want to chime in. I mean, it's very heartening to see that the feedback has reached to tool providers, and security is being seen not as a tick box and as a central element of the architecture. So that's very heartening for people like us to know. I want to acknowledge that before we answer your question, Kushbu. Right. But to answer your question, yes, there are a lot of standards, right? I mean, obviously, I take it as a given that depending on what tool we deploy, if it's in the healthcare industry, there are going to be HIPAA compliance. If it is a cloud architecture, there is going to be a SOC 1 or SOC 2 compliance. I mean, the compliance, whether it has to be PII compliant. You cannot have personal information be visible to anybody who outside the scope of authority, etc., etc. The standards are really endless. But my point, Kushbu, is more around each organization has its own internal standards, internal policies. For example, when it comes to simple things like password, some companies mandate a two-factor authentication. Some companies mandate a certain security, password policy itself, it has to have certain number of characters, certain combinations, it has to expire in a certain, even if you take simple things like every enterprise has got its own policy, right? The tool will have to adapt to these policies. That's to me the more important one, not just the standards that they comply to. The internal standards are extremely important, and when we measure a tool, it's how well can it comply to my internal standards becomes very, very important. Number one. And number two, after the installation, after we bring in and we roll out the particular tool, if there is any violation from a compliance standpoint, I shouldn't be, my engineers, my support team should not be spending a lot of time figuring out what those exceptions are, or they shouldn't come to know of it after the damage has been done. So in a proactive way, what kind of metrics can I get out of the tool, is another important dimension for me. So those are the, from a standards and compliance perspective, those are the things I would look for, Kushbu.
Great, understood. Fantastic discussion, Naren and Triveni. Looking at the time constraint, I have one last question for you, Triveni. Your thoughts before we end today's discussion?
No, I think after a long time, the points that I wanted to talk, Naren is already spoken
Oh,
about. So, but it's good. I mean, it's good to know that we are in sync that way, because normally what happens is the customer and the tools provider normally we do not sort of resonate. But I think completely agree with a lot of points, specifically the adoption point of it, right? I think change management is definitely the biggest, because a lot of times any kind of a tool you buy, the biggest issue is the adoption, right? It's not the tool functionalities, but it's really the adoption. And we see that as well when we sell in, right? So, having a vendor who has a change management plan even before selling to the customer, or even before pitching anything is crucial. And I'm glad you touched upon it. And also the metrics, right? Deciding on what should the tool perform, not after the sale but before the sale, right? What is if we can look at shortlisting at least two or three metrics which needs to be reviewed, and then I think the ROI can be justified. I think great points, Naren. A lot of takeaways for me personally as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Triveni. Kushbu, if I may add, I know we are running out of time,
Yes,
but there's one
surely.
closing note, which I want to talk a little bit about digital transformation. What I
Yeah.
want to emphasize here is the new ways of working. I talked about digital and human worker coming together, right? So especially in the support world, where we are moving towards is the system should be, we are going to see a system first approach to support. Meaning, today if you look at it, if I want a password to be changed, if I want access to a database, I send an email, some human reviews it, there is an SLA, it takes 2 days for us to get the password access. This is the norm, in the support industry. I think we are moving towards a mission first approach where the machines can understand the intent using AI and NLP. These machines can read my email and say, okay, so and so is asking for a database approval, and so is already authorized. They can check for the security policies and then auto approve it. I think we are moving to a model where machines will play a significant role in front ending support requests, and humans will come in as as the next level, if you will, as the either for oversight or for subject matter expertise or things that are not part of the regular norm. We'll have human workers come into the picture. We're seeing this transformation happening, and this is what I call as a digital transformation that completes the triple D I talked about: digitalization, and digital transformation. And I think it's applicable in the in the support world as well.
That's
Just
nice.
thought
Yes,
of sharing that
absolutely.
perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but great use case. I think that's how I think it's moving forward as well. So wonderful use case. Thank you, Triveni. You want to add
Yeah.
anything or yes?
No, no, I was just saying that that's definitely one of the most, I think most of the companies are trying to see how to do that is, you know, wherever possible, how can we reduce the human dependency, right? It should be
Yeah.
human operated, but not dependent. So that was a great
Yeah.
point.
That's a Triveni, now for me it's time for me to steal your line there: human operator but not dependent. I'll keep that in mind.
Great. Wonderful interaction with Ivo. Thank you so much, Naren. Thank you, Triveni, for taking out time
Thanks.
and joining us on the CIO News platform and sharing your wonderful insights.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you.
for having
Thanks.
me,
It was great.
Khushbu and Triveni. Yeah.
Thanks, Naren
Great.
and Khushbu.
Thank